Bad Batch has come to an end, but it still has a lot of questions on the specifics of the series. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink. The Bad Batch finale tied things to an end, but it still left some things to be desired. It went a different route than honestly I was expecting. It went more so the Rogue One route of like, the clearest and easiest path forward is just to murder and destroy everything that has been built up to this point. And that's what they did. They decided to kill a lot of the people and projects and pieces that Bad Batch and Hemlock had been building up throughout the whole series, really. Ever since season 1, we've been looking at what place the clones have in this new Star Wars world, this rise of the Empire, really. What purpose do they have with the clones? And this is something that I find very interesting, and I honestly wish they would have gone a little bit deeper into, and hopefully they do in the future. But with that ending, the ending, it didn't really seem like they were leaving that open as an option. They really tied Omega's story to an end and just said, yep, the clones are doing the clone things, and that's about it. But another piece that I actually want to talk about in this video is this idea around the history and the background and the purpose of why Hemlock was involved at all. What was he actually working on, and what was the whole deal with Hemlock? Hemlock was a very fascinating character. I felt like he was much more akin to like the almost like off-brand Thrawn, pretty much. There was a lot of things that he did that was very much like expecting in a couple steps ahead. And I really like those types of characters. I think it was really interesting to look at Star Wars and look at a character in Star Wars that makes more of like the smarter decisions. Takes a little bit of time to think about what is going to happen and then make adjustments accordingly. So in that side of things, I really enjoyed Hemlock as a character. I think his end was a little bit rough. I think I don't want to say Bad Batch took the easy way out, because killing someone in a Star Wars animated show is not as easy as you might think it would be. Just look at the past history of Rebels and the main characters. There's really just one main character that died, and there isn't a whole lot of examples of that in Star Wars up to this point. But when we look at his story arc as a whole, it might be lacking, but the actual intention behind his character I think is really interesting. This idea of being one of the founding members of Palpatine's plan to clone himself for himself to live basically endlessly into the future is something that I find really fascinating, and I think is an opportunity here for even deeper storytelling moving forward. And when we get to Project Necromancer, I think even more is revealed. Well, we didn't get the specifics, and I really appreciate that with this type of storytelling. I didn't feel like it was like, okay, now kids, we're gonna tell you everything and each step that we did to take this point, and it's like, oh no, you foiled my plans. None of that was in the show, which I really appreciate. I think it really respected the viewer in a way that I think is good, not necessarily seen in a lot of the live action stuff, so definitely a breath of fresh air there. And I think there's so much to unpack with this deeper story and the deeper experiments with the clones and Project Necromancer. Mount Tantus in Legends is this big location where Palpatine stores a lot of his experiments as well as his collection of historic pieces throughout Star Wars. It's one of those places that is mentioned many times. We do get to explore it in some of the books, but it's nothing that we've seen on any visual medium up until this point, which I think is really cool, and I would have loved to see more of it, but the stuff that we did see, I think is really cool. I get the feeling, though, that Project Necromancer was even more than what we saw. Obviously, we saw the resources that was dedicated to Mount Tantus moved over to Project Stardust, which is the Death Star. So we don't actually get to see any like little bit of building pieces or anything like that until we go up basically to the Mandalorian, where we see even more of this example of, hey, they're researching into cloning, and specifically cloning with continuing the force sensitivity side of cloning. We see the beginnings of what Palpatine is wanting to ultimately, and as we see in Rise of Skywalker, what he actually does accomplish, we see the building blocks, the foundation being set for this exploration later on in the franchise. Do we get the full details? Is it really accomplished in this show? No. But it's there, it's starting to make that one little line of somehow Palpatine returned make more sense. And I think the perfect opportunity for Star Wars animation is to continue that thread. I would love to see more of these explorations into what Palpatine was doing to actually accomplish this. Because as we saw with the Clone Wars, the throwaway line of the Clone Wars of like, oh yes, I fought with your father in the Clone Wars, sparked one of the best pieces of Star Wars in its storytelling aspect with the Clone Wars animated shows. Both of them, really. And I think there's more potential for that. But I do want to talk about more specifically Project Necromancer. I think Project Necromancer is super cool. I got the feeling like he was almost reanimating these dead clones. Now, and we don't get confirmation of that, we don't have any details to really confirm that, but my theory is that, yes, these were dead clones that they've been experimenting on with reanimating to make them even more robotic and drone-like. And I honestly think this was the early days of something like the Dark Troopers, where they are, as we see in The Mandalorian, fully robotic clone commando type characters and troopers. I think these Hemlock creations, I'll say, are the early days of that. They're like the version 0.5 before they start really fine-tuning what they eventually end up being in something like The Mandalorian. And this is the real strength of the Bad Batch, and furthermore, Hemlock's place in the broader Star Wars galaxy. While his specific experiments aren't going to be explored further as of yet with this version of the Empire, at least on this planet, in this facility, it will come to play later on in the Star Wars saga, in a different part of the galaxy, in a different time period. The efforts that Hemlock made were a huge part of what would eventually become the First Order. This is crazy when we look at it, and this is what I love about Star Wars animation. We get to see these deeper Star Wars stories fleshed out, explored, deepened, and the understanding and the impact of these small choices and small characters and small pieces in the Star Wars galaxy end up having a huge ramification later on in something outside of the original intention. So this is something I'm really looking forward to seeing more of, or I hope that we get to see more of. But let me know your thoughts below. Did you think that the Project Necromancer was actually revitalizing the clones from the dead? Or is it just like a broader strokes, like this can be used to reanimate someone else using their cells or whatever? Let me know in the comments below. Check out our podcast. And as always, may the Force be with you.